Kia ora koutou, ko Zara Taylor takunga ke ihi atero e mahi ana hei education team. My name is Zara Taylor and I'm part of the education team at Sport New Zealand. Today I have the absolute pleasure to introduce you to two key people, Louise Saviker and Jared Griffiths. Louise is the CE of Student Job Search, and Jared works for BDO and is a Gen Z manager there. So I'm really excited to hear from both of these guys. They are going to share with us today empowering Gen Alpha and Gen Z in the modern workplace. What I have learned about Louise from connecting with her before this is not only is she an amazing leader of her team, but also young people entering the job market. She's also a parent of two active young people, and she volunteers a lot of her time supporting her young people to be active. So she's an amazing person that is contributing to our sector, so really excited about this. So thank you, Louise and Sarah.
Okay, I think you can be order. Tēnā koutou I te whare, ko Louise aho. Thank you so much, Zara, for the amazing introduction. Thank you for coming to this talk today. It's really exciting to have you all here. And I am incredibly biased about Gen Z. I have two incredible children in this age group, and I'm supporting 400,000 tertiary students, of which 80% are Gen Z. But I promise today that this is not all going to be a rosy conversation. So for those of you in the room, if you're a Gen Z, is there a few Gen Zs in the room? Just a few, a few. You might need a support person beside you just to help you through the difficult conversations. Because a very big part of my role at Student Job Search is supporting employers to navigate this generation and really help them to thrive in the workplace. So I am biased, I'm unashamedly biased, but we're going to tackle some of the issues today that workplaces are facing. I'm not here to talk about sport. I love sport, my family loves sport. I come from a background in sport myself, in terms of that's where I started my career too. But today I'm here to talk about work and employment and what I'm experiencing at Student Job Search, helping people navigate the workforce, both as students and as employers. So we're here to talk about what workplaces are experiencing, how they're going, and what they're finding they're needing to change and what's winning for them in the workplace. Because I'm a Gen Z fan, I brought along a Gen Z hero who's going to be the highlight of the show, Jared from BDO. So BDO really stood out to me as an example of doing some extraordinary things to support graduates and their Gen Z, and they're facing some similar challenges to the sport and recreation service providers as well. So I really welcome Jared and give you a moment to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Louise. So like Louise said, I'm Jared. I am a Gen Z manager at BDO Wellington. So I'm from Palmerston North, or Fielding originally, and moved down here 7 or 8 years ago for uni. And then BDO was my first job out of university, so I've been there for about 4.5 years now. Once again, I'm a huge fan of sport as well. I've continued with tennis, football and rugby after high school, and continue to stay active as much as my body will allow me. So yeah, that's just a bit about me. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay, I always like to bring a Gen Z to all talks that I'm doing because I sometimes have trouble with technology, and we've got Lynn here who is taking some photos and doing things that I can never seem to manage to do. So in terms of, to start with, we're not talking about Gen Alpha today, so of all of the talks that you've probably already heard, you probably know Gen Z are around 13 to 29-year-olds. Therefore, they're not really in the workforce yet, perhaps doing some babysitting and some odd garden jobs for people. But our focus is on Gen Z, so that's the age group we're here to talk to you about today. And I can tell you businesses are struggling today's not all about positives. We will also delve into some challenges that they're facing. So today's goals. We really want to share some real-world examples of how workplaces like BDO are experiencing and supporting Gen Z, and some research-valid solutions. We want to spark some curiosity about how some of the things that other sectors are doing could be rolled over into your sector, or maybe you are already doing a lot of those things already and can celebrate your success. And maybe just ponder a little bit more about Gen Z in particular. So for me, in talking with employers, I have found that the most important thing is to make sure that workplaces understand and have empathy for this generation. The world that has actively shaped this generation, it's literally wired their brains, and it's real. So it's different to the world I grew up in as a Gen X, and it's creating a different environment in which the world of work is happening for these young people. So this generation were growing up in a tech saturation environment. Do you remember when you got your first phone, Zara?
So I think my first phone I would have got when I was 12, and it was a Nokia brick. So just before I was going to high school, thought it was important to have a cell phone. But no, definitely didn't grow up on an iPhone like a kid would today.
So you're probably horrified to know that I think email had just come out when I started work, my first job.
Oh wow.
It was like a big box that sat in the corner of the office. And I still had a fax. In fact, most of my work was done on a typewriter and fax when I first started work. So it's a very different environment. This group have also grown up in an environment of challenging norms. It's just normal for them. Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ plus rights, the Me Too movement and gun control are just a few of the many things that have shaped this generation. The global conflicts and hyper-awareness are all on steroids for this group because they are visible every day, accessible every day through their social media accounts and through the access to information that just, again, simply wasn't available when I was growing up. In addition, there's been some real defining events, and I'm sure that over the last couple of days you may have already touched on these, but it's important to consider that for Gen Z, these things have occurred at a time of development where their brains were literally wiring and learning and assimilating information. As an example, with the pandemic, we had the ability to go back to what was our prior norm. This generation didn't. They really were overnight changed and had no way to go back to something that was known beforehand. It really did change everything about them. And in the way at the workforce, we've found this to be really challenging. This has meant that we've seen the rise of Gen Z wanting to work from home, wanting to have more flexibility, wanting to work 0.8 weeks because a full-time load is too much. So it really did shape the way that this generation responded and their expectations going forward. One of the main significant issues of this generation in the workplace is the mental health issues, which is really exciting for me to be here today to talk to the sports community of New Zealand, because you are contributing so positively to this crisis, and the workplaces of New Zealand really need you, because mental health in the workplace is a significant issue that leaders and managers are tackling every single day. Around about half of all young people sitting in our offices or working in our forests or working in our communities are struggling. They're sitting at their desks feeling stressed, anxious, and this is really, really worrying to me as a mother, me as the leader of 400,000 students at Student Job Search, and I'm sure to all of you as well. The mental health crisis is real, and it's a significant challenge that we face in the workforce. Interestingly, the 67% of Gen Zs have low trust. They have low trust in brands, they have low trust in workplaces, they have low trust in managers, and that combined is a really interesting paradigm for managing stress and anxiety in the workforce. So work and sport and rec probably have some similarities, and then there's probably some challenges that each sector is facing that's different. But overall, employers have learnt to not generalise, Gen Z. So if you can take one thing from today, learn, but don't generalise. Every Gen Z has their own background, has their own experience, has their own education, has their own family and familial learnings that they bring with them into workplaces, and it's really important, and how I encourage managers to work with young people is to not generalise. So take the learnings from it, but always make sure you're considering each of your young people in your sport or workplace. The other key thing, the second key thing I'd really like you to take away is the balance. So in the workplace, we have managers who are facing Gen Zs who really want to work from home, for example. And my response to that is always, what's your organisational strategy? Does your organisational strategy allow for working from home? Does it work if your people are working from home? Or do you need your people in the office? Consider the balance of, should Gen Z be working from home, given we have a mental health crisis and more than 50% sitting stressed and anxious at their desk every day? I would want those people in a room that I can see, that I can support, that I can mentor, that I can grow and that I can develop. So be careful in listening to Gen Z and following through on what they want or what your surveys say to you they want. Make sure you're considering what they need and their well-being at the heart of that. This is the balance for workplaces, and most workplaces are saying to me around about an 80% at work is working for them to make sure their people are well and being looked after. This next slide, this is one I showed in March at an employer talk I was doing. So this was in a business environment, and I used a sports example to show the group the coolness, really, the interest of Gen Z. So this is the Boxing Day series with Constance, aged 19, definitely a Gen Zer, against the GOAT, Boomerang, who did 2 failed ramp shots to then, in a single over, have 2 4s and a 6. Most of you familiar with that match? Anyone remember that? The one thing that really stood out to me as a Gen Z promoter was the boomers in the commentary box and what they were saying during the time that this was going on. It was sort of, I can't believe he's doing it, and what's he thinking? So it was a really interesting display of intergenerational differences, the boomers in the box and then the Gen Z facing the millennial. Look, ultimately Sam wasn't doing anything particularly interesting or different for him. He was just going out doing what Gen Zs do. They're more about the positives of what I can achieve by getting the runs and taking on the GOAT as opposed to preserving his wicket. This shows the kind of challenges that workplaces are facing, and I can imagine yours too. So it is both positives and challenges, and those present fantastic opportunities when managed well, like BDO do every day in their workplace. So just to touch on what this group do and how they like to work, let's just touch on some of what employers consider to be the more negative traits of Gen Z. The shorter attention spans. So the challenge to stay focused. Some of you may be able to have some sympathy for that. You know, you're in a 2-day conference. It may not be easy to stay focused all the time. But for some Gen Zs, they are used to short form content. They want something right now, yesterday. Why did you take half an hour to say something that you could have said in 30 seconds? So this is the short form era. I encourage employers to level up and try and meet their need here. This is one that we can kind of go, you know what, they're right. I could say this in a shorter way. I could get the message over quicker. I need to probably stop emailing because the Gen Zs don't read emails. So there's a shorter attention span is the issue, but there's lots of solutions employers are finding. The need for instant feedback. I'm sure that this is a problem in sport as well, but for managers, every day Gen Z wants real-time, continuous feedback about what they're doing, how they're performing, where they could do better. It's a really big factor for this generation and is super challenging for managers who are already juggling a big load, lots of their own stress, and now they've got a team of Gen Z that they're having to provide continuous feedback or find new methodology, new technology, new short-form content to meet that need. It's a real challenge, but when managers get it right, it really, really does lead to extraordinary results. There's lower employer loyalty, so we see a lot more switching, less time in certain roles or certain organisations. There's a discomfort for hierarchies and autonomy. Lots of workplaces are getting around this. They share that they're doing things like lots of project teams, advisory panels. They're finding ways to incorporate Gen Z into all elements of the workforce and to make them feel heard and have some input. What I also find is working really well in the workplace is for workplaces to balance this rise of autonomy for young people with education on risk. So at BDO, for example, they put in place a lot of controls to make sure that team members are having appropriate sign-out and understand the risk level with everything they're doing so that we can ensure that everything is safe and executed well. Digital first, face-to-face second, yeah, so they do, and we need to meet that need, and workplaces they are changing the way that they're working. If you think of Teams and other Teams messaging, it's becoming the norm. Online meetings, even when half the people are in the office and half the people might be at home. So the digital first, face-to-face second is happening, it is evolving in workplaces, but again, remember the mental health crisis and the need for social in-person connection, and the workplaces that are doing this really well and meeting this need really well are considering both factors. Work-life balance. So we see that's becoming a real challenge for workplaces, particularly with the working from home, the flexible working, and it is actually becoming increasingly common for young people to want to work part-time. So this is new challenges for workplaces. And mental health prioritisation, and what we've found in the workforce is that the workplaces that are prioritising mental health are doing really well, but they're doing this not through a standard way of applying one set of practices. What they're doing is they're actually doing deep dives into their workplace, into their Gen Zs, finding out what those Gen Zs specifically need as a cohort or as an individual, and then tailoring solutions to those. Blanket wellbeing and health and safety measures do not work well in the workplace. Definitely tailored individual ones are working much better. But BDO have some pretty cool things going on that are meeting theirs as well. So let's go to the positives. So I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about all of the positives of Gen Z, and workplaces are finding these too. They're very tech savvy, they're amazing, they know how to use clickers and audio equipment, and they just thrive with any new software. And look, to be frank, it's just not the case for some of us. But, of course, I'm sure I'm just an anomaly. Maybe everybody else is far more competent than I. They're adaptable and change ready, and this is fantastic. Workplaces are finding they can pilot things, they can trial things, they can do new programs, they can innovate, and they can do things at so much faster speed. So this group is a group that you can lean into and say, how could we pilot something new? What new innovations could we try? Trials, pilots, they don't tie workplaces down to anything, and so they're a fantastic way of trying things and having a fast fail, and then they can move on, try something new. Champions of inclusion, this is just the norm now. So diversity, inclusion. The Gen Zs are like, what are we even talking about? It's an expectation, it's a fundamental value. They need to see it. It's a little bit the same around environmental issues as well. They've grown up in storms, they don't need to believe in climate change. They know it's there, they've seen it from the time they're little. They just expect businesses and workplaces to be part of sustainable solutions. They're purpose-driven and really impact-orientated with a strong sense of justice, which from my experience in sport, you're going to see a bit of that from time to time from youth. And the thing about being very purpose-driven and individual is that every person has a different purpose. So it's very easy for us to think, oh, well, Gen Z are very purpose-driven, and so therefore it's all about changing the world or having positive impact. But actually, if you ask each Gen Z, their purpose, their why will be very different. And it's important, therefore, to find out at a cohort level what is driving Gen Z, and then at an individual level as a manager dealing with your Gen Zs, what you can do to better understand them and support them with their purpose. They're globally connected and systems thinkers, so this just makes them good at everything. They can connect thinking, they can solve problems, they can find new ways to think about things that previous generations couldn't. They're also the most educated, highly educated generation yet. These guys are smart, and we really need to lean in and support this. They're innovative, fresh thinkers. They love learning. They love learning. It's all about learning. And the managers that are leaning into this and supporting learning really well in the workplace are the ones that are having thriving teams and outcomes. So in terms of just to kick off next, we're going to just talk about what's actually going on well for BDO and chat with Jared. So Jared, what do you think are sort of some of the challenges that you've faced as a Gen Z manager that maybe surprised you a bit?
Yeah, well, I suppose as a Gen Z manager, on the next slide, we can see that our accounting numbers and applicants for accounting university courses are declining, and we've seen that in our graduate applications as well. So it's really made it a lot more difficult to be able to actually find good quality graduate applications because it's a lot more competitive out there.
So in a way you've had to respond to the market because there was no graduates coming out.
Exactly.
And I know that sport's doing really well, but the graphs are not dissimilar in terms of trends, and for accounting and other areas of business is really hard to find graduates at the moment. So workplaces are having to really adapt. In terms of what sort of surprised you about being a hiring manager, in particular, a Gen Z managing Gen Zs? What are the sort of challenges that you've faced?
Yeah, well, I think from what I've seen in the grad applicants, it was almost, a lot of them were asking, well, what else is in it for me? Like a job isn't really good enough anymore. It's what are the extra things that we can do? So like we've had to adapt throughout the years to overcome this and offer like more flexible working hours, working from home policies, great career progression. How can we help them with other external things as well, whether it like they need to take like celebration leave, or there's lots of extra things that we've had to adapt that have made us look more favourable than our competition, and I think it's worked reasonably well.
What do you think some older managers do maybe not so well with managing and supporting Gen Z?
I think some of the older managers may see that Gen Z might not be like hard working necessarily, which isn't exactly correct. I think Gen Z, from my experience, needs a little bit more guidance and needs to see kind of like what is in it for them and how they can meet those requirements. And then once they see kind of what they can get out of their hard work, then they can become a lot more engaged and actually work very well.
A lot of the Gen Z are extremely entrepreneurial, so often when they're going home at the end of the day, they've also got side hustles, side businesses, all sorts of things going on. So, it certainly doesn't seem to be a case of not contributing or not being motivated, that's for sure. So what do you think you've done that's really helped Gen Z thrive in your team?
I think in our team, like creating a great team culture has been huge. If people are happy to come to the office and actually want to hang out with their colleagues, they're a lot more motivated to do well. So when we've offered things like being able to work from home or flexible working hours, if we've had team members in the past that have played sport like quite competitively, so have had to leave early for trainings or have to start late, or if they have to pick like kids up for school. We have had some Gen Zs that actually have that as well. Being able to offer a bit more like flexibility, people were a lot more grateful for that, and I think because of that are a lot more happy to come into work and work very well.
Awesome. Okay. Well, let's have a look at some of the recruitment strategies that we know are working. So in terms of the research shows that tech-driven recruitment is working, and I'm sure in sport you're utilising this already. Short form, social first communication, purpose matters, expressing purpose, helping young people to align to your purpose, acknowledging that everyone's purpose is going to be different, so thinking about that and making sure your communications allows for that tangible benefits. As BDO, having to lead the way, having to resource staff, they've had to meet the need. Commitment to diversity and inclusion, and look, aesthetic and vibe count. So the lovely Yi Lin, who's over there taking photos, this is her PowerPoint. It's beautiful PowerPoint. I would never change it. Gen Z, they rock. This is their vibe. So this is a Gen Z presentation today. Aesthetics matter, vibe matters. Think about the vibe and everything that you're doing. So in terms of at BDO, Jared, what's working there with recruitment?
So I think with recruitment, what's worked really well is for us is we've got a very clear path of how to succeed. So right from, like for example, when I started as a graduate, I came in and I looked at my manager and how long it took them to get there, and then it's very clear what the steps are from like me, like as a graduate, to like that manager position. So for us, career progression is very good and very clear, and I think it's very motivating for Gen Z because if they can see like how they actually get to that next step, it makes it a lot more achievable for them. So I've found that that's worked really well when we have either like 6-month or annual performance reviews, for example. Then it can be like motivating, like, okay, what do I need to do in the next 6 months to get to that next step, or the next year for me to be able to get to that manager position or senior position or whatever it might be. So I'm hoping now that I'm a manager and the graduates that we've hired can kind of see how long it's taken me to get there. Hopefully it's providing a bit of motivation for them to also realise that they can achieve it in like 3-4 years, whatever it may be. But I think the most important thing for us is that we've had a lot of clear steps for them. So it seems a lot more achievable than you go straight from accountant to manager, but it's very hard to define like how long that should be taking. So I think for us it's worked out really well, having that clear path progression.
Just focusing on the short term rather than, I imagine, not necessarily the pathway to partner.
Yeah, exactly.
The pathway to a UK or Europe holiday.
Yeah.
How do we get on that pathway? Okay, so in terms of mental health, what do you feel is working for BDO in the mental health?
I think what's working really well for us is our flexible hour policy. So we do have a policy that allows people to work during like core hours of the day, so everyone's there, but outside of that they can make it up as they please. So being allowing people to be able to sleep in if they're not a morning person, for example, or if they want to go like play sport or go for a run after work and finish at 3 o'clock on a Friday, giving them that flexibility to be able to do so has worked really well. And we've found that in our team in particular, it's really helped with people's mental health and feeling a lot more like fresh and actually wanting to come into the office rather than like working from home. Like, because we've created a great environment, people would rather come and see each other at the office rather than working from home and being not very interested or engaged, I suppose.
And how about the wisdom teeth?
Yeah, I can speak quite recently on that because we have health insurance at BDO, having that security to know that if you need wisdom teeth out, like I got my wisdom teeth out 2 weeks ago, so luckily I'm not lisping anymore, I can talk a little more clearly, but having that security to know that it's not going to be such a financial burden on you, and to be able to take time off and work, allowing you to take the week or however long it takes to recover has been really important. And we've got a lot of people that have done the same thing, taking their wisdom teeth out because they can, and it's not going to cause them financial stress.
It's a real thing. We've got one of our team members having her wisdom teeth out today, and this is just a genuine Gen Z challenge. And so you may be thinking, what's that got to do with us in sport? And it's got nothing to do with sport. But it's interesting to think, what are your problems? What are the problems with your audiences and participants? And what kind of initiatives or support things could you put in place to really meet that particular need? Because the need of the wisdom teeth is just blowing my mind. The Gen Zs, them and their wisdom teeth, that's a big problem. So, okay, so in terms of how about culture, connection, what are you doing there in that space that's worked well?
Yeah, so I think creating a great culture and environment at work has been really important and has motivated a lot of our Gen Z staff. So what we're doing is we've got quite a few things that we offer, but something that I'm quite passionate about is a fully funded social club. So I'm running the social club for the firm as well, and we offer team and firm events each month. And by offering those kind of events for everyone, trying to make it as inclusive as possible, lots of different activities. We have indoor sports teams that we have throughout the year as well. So by offering kind of those extra social and fun events, people are like just more happy in general and want to actually succeed because you're doing this like extra thing for them. So they're like grateful that you're doing it.
That's fantastic. And the soft skills in young people, Gen Z in particular, are a known challenge for employers. So all of our employers are reporting that Gen Z are arriving into the workplace and really struggling with their soft skills. But what's going on at BDO to help this?
Yeah, so especially as a graduate or someone that doesn't have any work experience, coming in and even simple things like knowing how to like type an email or knowing how to communicate with your manager is very important. So right from the get-go, we have a lot of training programs and assign everyone a buddy, which is like someone that's been there for a year already. So I think for us, like what's worked well is having lots of like small training sessions on these soft skills to help encourage people to become better at them, and then over the years they'll kind of hopefully be very professional and actually be able to have great soft skills and be able to teach these to the next generations coming through. So career progression and training has been like a big part that has helped really make the soft skills like flourish.
So Connie from Zared's HR team was telling me that all of these sort of soft skills used to be something that just were able to be assimilated naturally when people would join the workforce, but now they've had to make it really explicit, sizable, scalable, and spaced with continuous learning for it. So it really has become something. And again, it's amazing what the sport, rec and play communities can actually do to support young people to be work ready. And, because soft skills and working in sport is, or recreation of any type, really does require great communication. So you're really helping the workforce. This is an area that you can definitely help us all. But also, perhaps you too could think about the kind of specific needs or ways that you could provide more explicit soft skills training to your people so they can thrive, particularly in team sports. So, we're almost there, almost ready for questions. So, what Gen Z stay for in the workplace, this is not my view, this is just research, this is what it says. So they're looking for purpose and alignment with their values, their story, their needs. It'll be different for everybody. Don't make assumptions, don't generalise. Flexibility and wellbeing support. So the wisdom teeth, the flexible working, all of those things in the workforce are absolutely essential to attract and keep talent. Clear pathways with visible growth, micro-learning each step, deliberately laid out. This is not about a pathway to partner or a pathway to the All Blacks. This is about what's just my next step. How can I keep learning? How can I keep thriving? How can I keep feeling challenged? How can I feel connected? How can I feel like I'm growing my skills? This generation is smart. They want to learn, learn, learn. Strong manager relationships and feedback. So when managers are thriving with Gen Z, the Gen Zs will thrive. If you have managers, or when I talk to workplaces and employers, when their managers are struggling with their Gen Zs, that's when they come up to me after the talk and say, can you come and talk to my managers? Because my managers need more support. Even BDO, they're looking at their next steps as rolling out more support and more materials for their managers. So their managers are better positioned to support Gen Z. And just meaningful work and a sense of contribution, and that will look different for everybody again. So in terms of from case study to your context, the key things I would just say is to adapt now. This will set you up for decades. So my understanding of Gen Alpha coming to the workforce is that they're just going to be the same but amplified, like on steroids, people are describing them. So once you make some changes now and you change the way that you're approaching some things like BDO, you can expect this will set you up for at least a decade, if not more. So that's a really great investment for some initiatives or interventions now. Many workplaces are struggling. So this is not something that employers and managers are thriving with. They are struggling. Sport's an interesting solution or piece of the puzzle that could help the workplaces as well. And the way that they're managing that and making changes is evolving really quickly. In terms of the success, understand the generational differences. Without empathy and without understanding the events like the pandemic, like the GFC, like the environmental and climate change, without understanding what has wired this generation, it's really difficult to elicit empathy in the workplace. So try and create some empathy and understanding of what this generation grew up with. This helps reduce friction and harness the strength. Apply work for our lessons to your sport and community. I don't know what that might look like. I'd be delighted to hear if you come up with anything that works well, that you pilot, maybe trial, implement and see how you go. But don't over-generalise. Balance your changes with your organisational strategy. What Gen Z want isn't always the very best for them. So make sure you're taking both that stewardship and that care for this generation and making sure you're keeping their wellbeing at the heart of your decision making. So as you're listening to them, try and understand where they're coming from and find ways to support them. So thank you for coming to today, and we've got 6 minutes left for any questions that anyone might have. And again, thank you to you, Lynn, for the lovely slideshow, our wonderful Gen Z, and to Zared for coming along. Thank you, Gen Z Manager.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Louise and Zared. Are there any questions? You can run the mic around.
See if it's a hard one.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. My question is related to your notion about the need for constant feedback, but the high levels of anxiety that Gen Z are suffering, because in my experience, giving honest feedback to a Gen Z results in tears, or storming out of the office because they're not able, they don't have the built-in resilience to cope with feedback that is delivered in an appropriate way. So that's my question. How do you navigate that space?
So your question is one that gets asked in maybe a slightly different form, but at every talk that I've been at, and this is where the balancing their needs with your organisational strategy and what you need must come into play. So we must support them, we must give them feedback, it is actually a need. On the other side of the equation, we need to give skills to our managers so that they can have those conversations, they can do them in really constructive ways, they can do them in the very best ways. What I hear you saying though is that's probably already happening. We still have tears. I personally experience that, other people tell me that too. I think the main thing is creating that organisational psychological safety around managers, really making sure that people feel valued, heard, respected. Once you have someone in that space, it becomes much easier to mentor and guide them. And then alongside the structured learning, they can then see that actually what you're there to do is to guide them. And again, the sport is fantastic because coaches, if they can do this in their communities, you're already demonstrating for young people what that can look like in the workforce. My latest hire is a Māori Cup winner rower, and I was like, fantastic. She's used to having someone yell feedback at her from the boat. This will be great, and she is. I'm able to say, that's brilliant, that needs a bit more work, I'd really like to see you growing in this space. And she's really good at taking that feedback. But I've already taken the time to make sure that she understands that she's highly valued, here's her plan, here's what I'm going to do to support her over the next 1 year. Beyond that, it's just too much for them. But it's what you are experiencing is the norm, and that's where things like the wellbeing programs, access to EAP or an alternate counselling service is also really important. Managers are trying their best to avoid getting into counselling with their team members. That's really not a safe place to be. So it's about looking at all of the things that you're doing across all of the factors, but it's a real problem. One to lean into, though, rather than lean out.
Kia ora, thank you. I'm just about to out myself as a bit grumpy. The question that's been sort of brewing for me the last couple of days, and it is a bit to do, Zared, I think, with what you were talking about, putting protection around risk of people taking actions and what are the risks involved. Where does responsibility sit with this? So responsibility of Gen Zers who are being paid to do a job, to do the job. And yes, you've got to have all these things in place to make it a safe and welcoming environment. But there is also a responsibility to do the thing you're being paid to do. So how do you get that balance without the tears and without the there's a huge investment of time and energy to put these things into play. And yes, it's worth it, but is it always worth it? Or does the Gen Z person have a responsibility too?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Sarah to answer that, but after I tell you about an example at another talk that I did where an employer fired a young person, a graduate, because they had been watching the NBA and refused to stop watching the basketball. So they had raised this with them many times, and they were just super confused as to why they could not watch basketball at work. This was just a mystery to them. They felt that their billable hours would be just absolutely fine with or without the side, and promptly worked through a process, an appropriate employment process, and terminated the person's employment. And my response to that was, that's alarming and sad that that young person wasn't able to take on the feedback, and that they had every right as an employer to do that. But that's why for us, in supporting employers, and for me, supporting 400,000 students, for Zared, supporting his team, and for all of you nurturing this generation, we all do have a responsibility to lean into the challenges and provide really constructive ways to support them.
Yeah, so it's a good question. So especially for like our new graduates that come in, we try and really set the standard from the get-go. So the expectation is very little at the start, but knowing what that they need to work towards, I suppose, from the get-go is what we kind of aim to do. So for the first couple months, it's very much like our responsibility as managers to make sure that they're feeling safe and know where like their like standard of work is and what their expectations are. And once that they feel comfortable, then it's like, okay, now that you're comfortable doing the job and I've seen that you can do the work well, that's when the responsibility on their end kind of starts taking part, I suppose. So that's kind of how we've worked towards it, but it's probably just a bit more kind of time consuming than right off the bat, this is what you need to do, this is what we expect of you. If you don't do it straight away, then that's not good enough kind of thing. Yeah, so we're trying to be like more comforting to them to start with, I suppose.
It's definitely more time consuming than it was 20 years ago, perhaps. Yeah.
That's all the time we have questions for. We're about to head into lunch, and Lou and Zared are staying, so if you do have any more questions, feel free to go chat to them. But ngā mihi nui ki a koe, thank you so much. And let's join me in saying thank you to these guys. Ho mai te whakapaki.
Kia ora. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.